everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. Hillary Clinton came out swinging against Democratic rival Bernie Sanders in the first one-on-one debate between the candidates. In her opening statement in New Hampshire, Clinton said she's not making promises she can't keep, calling some of Sanders' proposals unachievable. The battle grew extremely heated when the two tried to make the case over who is more progressive. With me to talk about all the highlights are Real Clear Politics national political reporter Caitlyn Huey-Burns and NewYorker.com editor Nick Thompson here in the studio. In Washington, CBSN political contributor and Democratic strategist Lynda Tran. And in New Hampshire, we have CBS News congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes and CBS News senior political editor Steve Chaggaris. Thank you all for being with us. The biggest fireworks of the night came when Clinton blasted Sanders for his, quote, attacks by insinuation.
To my mind, if we do not get a handle on money in politics and the degree to which big money controls the political process in this country, nobody is going to bring about the changes that is needed in this country for the middle class and working families.
Yeah, but I think it's fair to really ask what's behind that comment. You know, Senator Sanders has said he wants to run a positive campaign. I've tried to keep my disagreements over issues, as it should be. But time and time again, by innuendo, by insinuation, there is this attack that he is putting forth, which really comes down to, you know, anybody who ever took donations or speaking fees from any interest group has to be bought. And I just absolutely reject that, Senator. And I really don't think these kinds of attacks by insinuation are worthy of you. And enough is enough. If you've got something to say, say it directly. But you will not find that I ever changed a view or a vote because of any donation that I ever received. And I have stood up and I have represented my constituents to the best of my ability, and I'm very proud of that. You know, so I think it's time to end the very artful smear that you and your campaign have been carrying out in recent weeks. And let's talk about the issues. Let's talk about the issues that divide us.
Okay, let's talk
we
about
both
issues.
agree with campaign finance reform.
Let's talk about issues.
I worked hard for McCain-Feingold. I want to reverse Citizens United.
Let's talk about issues.
Let's talk about issues.
Let's talk about issues. All right, let's talk about why in the 1990s Wall Street got deregulated. Did it have anything to do with the fact that Wall Street spent billions of dollars on lobbying and campaign contributions? Well, some people might think, yeah, that had some influence.
Nancy and Steve, I want to start with you. Nancy, you have been following these two on the campaign trail. It seemed like the gloves really came off during this debate.
They did, and the Clinton campaign planned to go after Senator Sanders on this issue for two reasons. First of all, they're very worried about the possibility of Sanders turning into sort of this transformational figure the way that Barack Obama was 8 years ago, where you really, couldn't attack him because he was somehow elevated above politics. So they're working overtime to try to convince voters that he is just a regular politician. So anytime he says anything that they can construe as having a hint of negativity to it, Secretary Clinton is going after him on the stump and going after him in the debate the way she did tonight about calling her a moderate. The other thing is that they have to figure out a way to deal with this line of attack from Senator Sanders about taking Wall Street donations, because it is really hurting her. I can't tell you how many voters I've talked to here in New Hampshire and in Iowa, and I'm sure you have too, who say, well, I'm really concerned about all the money that she takes from Wall Street. And it's also getting to this issue that she struggles with of being seen as honest and trustworthy. So they had to figure out a way to turn that around on him. And she's tried a couple times before, but this may have been a more successful line of approach than she's than she's seen in the past.
And it's really borne in the fact that his favorability numbers are higher than hers consistently, whether it's in the states or whether it's nationally. And so this is an effort by her to really sort of chip away. I mean, his favorability numbers are skyrocketing among Democrats. And so this is really her effort to chip away at that.
You know, you mentioned Wall Street, and I actually want to play, it's SOT number 9 in the control room. It's a moment where Hillary Clinton was asked about essentially her Wall Street ties, and specifically on the issue of what she has said during some of these paid speeches, what she said privately during these paid speeches to Goldman Sachs. Let's listen to that.
This is what the questioner wrote verbatim. I am concerned with the abuses of Wall Street has taken with the American taxpayers' money. And then she asked whether you would release the transcripts of your Goldman Sachs speeches, and then added, don't you think the voting public has a right to know what was said? But let's make that bigger. Are you willing to release the transcripts of all your paid speeches?
I will look into it. I don't know the status, but I will certainly look into it. But I can only repeat what is the fact, that I spoke to a lot of different groups with a lot of different constituents, a lot of different kinds of members about issues that had to do with world affairs. So my view on this is, look at my record. Look at what I am proposing. And we have a vigorous agreement here. We both want to rein in the excesses of Wall Street. I also want to rein in the excesses of companies like Johnson Controls that we bailed out when they were an auto parts company, and we saved the auto industry, and now they want to avoid paying taxes. I want to go after the pharmaceutical companies like Valiant and Turing that are increasing prices without any regard to the impact on people's health. So I have a broader view. Now, if all we're going to talk about is one part of our economy, and indeed one street in our economy, we're missing the big oil companies, we're missing other big energy companies, we're missing the big picture.
Lynda, let me ask you, what do you make of that answer?
Well, I certainly think it was a stronger answer than she delivered last night at the town hall. She was pretty expansive about pushing back. I think another part that wasn't part of that clip, but that was pretty strong, was when she said that if I really was on the side of Wall Street, then they wouldn't be calling all of their money to attack me. So certainly she was much more forceful. She'd clearly thought about the way that she was going to deal with this question, and she was much better than she was last night.
Well, so what she said at the town hall, for our viewers who don't know, she was asked basically, well, you think it's okay to get paid $675,000 for these speeches? And she basically said, I don't know. That's what they offered. So, Caitlyn, let me turn to you and ask you about, though, the top of that answer, where she was asked point blank, will you release the transcripts of these paid speeches that you gave before Goldman Sachs? She didn't say yes.
Right. It was an easy answer. It should have been an easy answer for her. As Steve mentioned earlier, you know, there are lingering questions related to the Clintons about trustworthiness. Her question left some seeds of doubt, whether she has been forthright in what she says about, when I talk to these folks, I tell them kind of what my stance is. It just leaves some room for interpretation from her opponents. On the Democratic side and on the Republican side, we saw lots of Republicans already talking about this particular moment.
You think it's a vulnerability, Nick?
Oh my God, for her, it was just the worst part of the debate. I mean, she was so forceful, so articulate, and then the whole banking section, she was just a pretzel, right? And that was such a softball. She released the transcripts. Of course you should release the transcripts. But then she's talking about Bin Laden. She's talking about Dodd-Frank. You know, you got to talk about the energy industry. She's just going all over the place. It was a total mess. And she's running against a guy who answers almost every question with break up the banks. So she ought to be better on this banking thing.
Yeah, Nancy, let me turn to you. What do you think?
I got to tell you that there is a conversation, I am sure, going on at Clinton headquarters right now about how can we avoid releasing these transcripts, for the very simple reason that when a company pays you $200,000 to come give a speech, you're probably going to say a few nice things about that company. And can you imagine 20 different speeches where she is praising Goldman Sachs, you know, and every other Wall Street firm, you know, things that were niceties at the time, But right now, when Bernie Sanders is railing against Wall Street, make her look like a creature of Wall Street, especially if they get taken out of context. So that's why she hedged. Yes, absolutely. It would look better for her if she just said, yes, let's put it all out there. But that's probably the reason they don't want it out there.
But I think what's going to happen now is now that this was raised on national TV and she hedged and the transparency question is going to be out there, they might be forced to do this, and then it's going to open up a whole other can of worms, just like the emails, and we're all going to be reading these transcripts, looking for every little nugget and scandalous thing that may have been said at these things. So it's just going to be more fun for us, I guess, in terms of reading more Clinton paperwork.
Just when they got done with the emails being released.
Right. I mean, and for our viewers, it's 675,000 over 3 speeches. I mean, exactly what you're talking about. If these transcripts were released, we're talking about potentially a ready-made ad, not just for Bernie Sanders, but, you know, Republicans, I'm sure, would pounce on that as well. Lynda, let me ask you just about that notion that there needs to be perhaps a way for her to answer that question, though. I mean, you said that the rest of the answer you thought was good, but that central notion, someone on Twitter said, Bernie Sanders folks should be putting up their poster boards saying, release the transcripts, release the transcripts. That should be their mantra now for Hillary Clinton. Is there the danger that she could be facing this continuous drip, drip, drip of questions about that?
Well, I guess what I would say is that if she does end up facing a drip, 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 it won't be different than anything else that she's faced up until now. In fact, she alluded to this a little bit later in the debate when the question of electability came up, and there was this whole long series about that. I mean, in Hillary Clinton, you have somebody that, unlike all the other candidates, has really been vetted, has really been under attack for most of her life, her public life. And so I assume that in this case as well, she's shown that she's a fighter, right? She'll be able to bear it as well.
Right, but we're going into New Hampshire now.
Sure. Although in New Hampshire, we already know that she's the underdog here. We already know that she's facing a 20-30 point gap. So, this issue is probably something that'll come up and it'll be under discussion as we move forward. But I don't think that it actually has a huge impact in this particular moment, given what we expect the outcome is going to be in any case.
Oh, go ahead. Do you want to say something,
I just
Nick?
want to make a strong argument for releasing the darn transcripts. At this point, right, these are speeches she must have thought about in advance. She wrote, she had lots of people who knew she was running for president look at them. She knew she was probably going to run for president when she wrote them. There probably isn't anything too crazy in them. Release them. Secondly, here's the kind of interesting thing. I've read through lots of Hillary Clinton's emails. You can see a reason why somebody would want to keep your emails private, but they're now released, they're out there. You know what's interesting about them? You read 500 Clinton emails, you like her more. She's a good boss. She's articulate. She's saying smart things. I kind of think you release the transcripts, there will be some things that get pulled out. Probably they'll make her seem more likable. And if she doesn't release them, it's going to play into the whole Clinton secretive narrative. It's going to be a disaster. So
yeah, I don't disagree with that. Yeah, I don't disagree with what Nick is saying at all when it comes to releasing things. I think, though, the concern that Nancy raised a little bit earlier about things being taken out of context is the real issue here. Yeah. It's not just the general public looking at these long transcripts. What's going to happen is that there are going to be little snippets of it that are taken out of context and could be really damaging.
Steve, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I just want to say that we're all talking about transcripts. This is it's another distraction. It's another thing that Hillary Clinton has to talk about that distracts her from actually talking about whatever vision she has for her campaign and for being president. I think the one thing we've seen throughout this campaign is Bernie Sanders has been able to just sort of lay out his vision without having to deal with all these sort of side distractions. Hillary Clinton's constantly talking about emails. Now she's going to be talking about transcripts for speeches she gave to Wall Street. These are things that she's losing control of her message. And at a time when she has to regain control of her message and really show Democrats what her true vision is for her campaign and her candidacy, she's unable to do that because she's constantly having to answer these questions about all these other distracting things.
All right, Steve Chaggaris for us there. Our thanks to both you as well as Nancy Cortez. I know you've got a busy night still ahead. Thank you so much. Let's go in and now play an additional piece of sound where there was some heated exchanges. This was on the issue of who is the actual progressive candidate, Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton.
I've heard Senator Sanders' comments, and it's really caused me to wonder who's left. in the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Under his definition, President Obama is not progressive because he took donations from Wall Street. Vice President Biden is not progressive because he supported Keystone. Senator Shaheen is not progressive because she supports the trade pact. Even the late, great Senator Paul Wellstone would not fit this definition because he voted for DOMA. You know, we have differences, and honestly, I think we should be talking about what we want to do for the country. But if we're going to get into labels, I don't think it was particularly progressive to vote against the Brady bill 5 times. I don't think it was progressive to vote to give gun makers and sellers immunity. I don't think it was progressive to vote against Ted Kennedy's immigration reform.
The reality is that there has been trillions of dollars of wealth going from the middle class in the last 30 years to the top 1/10 of 1%. The reality is that we have a corrupt campaign finance system which separates the American people's needs and desires from what Congress is doing. So to my mind, what we have got to do is wage a political revolution where millions of people who have given up on the political process stand up and fight back, demand a government that represents us and not just a handful of campaign contributors. I think that President Obama, Vice President Biden, and the Democratic leadership in the House and the Senate have done a fantastic job. We are in much better shape today than we were 7 years ago, although my Republican colleagues seem to have forgotten where we were 7 years ago. That's the fact. But we still have a very long way to go. Do I think President Obama is a progressive? Yeah, I do.